Hi weaving friends, I just realised recently that it's almost 10 years since I bought my first Ashford rigid heddle loom, and I've never actually done a review on this loom. So today I'm going to take you over this loom, give you my honest thoughts on what I do or don't like about it, and just explain what all of the different parts are and what you use them for. This video is brought to you by the Woe2Go Beginner's Rigid Heddle Loom Weaving Course. This is an online course that has taken hundreds of brand new weavers through their first project, getting to know their looms and coming out the other side with having made something beautiful. It will help you to understand your loom, give you the confidence to warp it up and start weaving your first project. And it includes all the information you need from start to the finish of the project. This class is available for single purchase, or if you have a membership to the online weaving school, then you can simply log in and enjoy the course. If you're a single purchase user, once you've purchased the class, it belongs to you and you have permanent access to it, and you can go back as many times as you need to and review the information over and over. You will also receive support if you need it, because I'm always there to help. I'll leave the link to the class down below. So as I said, this was my very first Ashford rigid heddle loom. It is the 24-inch or 60-centimeter loom. And by the way, if you didn't already know, when we're talking about sizing, 24 inches is referring to the weaving width rather than the physical width of the loom. So when you're buying a loom for the first time, especially if you're purchasing online and your space is important to you, make sure that you check the dimensions, the overall dimensions of the loom, to know exactly what size you're getting. This is just such a fantastic loom. It's one of the sizes that I would recommend most for beginners. A lot of people do ask me whether they should opt for the 32-inch or the 24, and it's a very difficult question to answer because there are so many variables involved. Not just the cost, not just the space, but the comfort of weaving and that sort of thing. It's something that you really need to think about your own physical capabilities and cater to what you think you need. Also important to consider is what you think you want to be weaving the most of on your loom. So if you, for example, thought that you would be weaving almost exclusively scarves, then you wouldn't need a loom that was very wide. And if you thought that you really wanted to weave blankets, then you definitely do want something wider. A lot of people do end up upgrading after they purchase their first loom. After a certain amount of time, they weave, they find that they really love it, and they want to expand into bigger or sometimes smaller sizes, and that's a good way to go as well. So having a look at this loom, and I'll just put my shuttle aside for a moment, you can see that if I tip the loom on its edge, that it's basically a rectangular frame, and it's a very sturdy wood that Ashford uses to make their looms with. Now, I think you'll find it interesting to see a loom that is almost 10 years old, that's been used pretty much constantly, how it's actually performed over the years and whether I've had any problems with it. Let's have a look at the loom from the side. This is the loom from the front to the back. And sometimes people get a little bit confused about which is the front and which is the back. Really easy way to tell with an Ashford loom is the front is rounded and the back has this little cut out edge. You'll notice that the cut out edge along with this circle here tends to look a little bit like a bird's head, which is kind of cute, but it also makes it very obvious that this is the back. Now the cut out edge is to allow for, if you don't have a stand, you can prop this edge on a table, and it's really fantastic because you can then hold the loom very steady while you're weaving. Now, if you're wondering about these bolts that are sticking through here and here, they belong to my stand, and I will touch on the stand in a moment, but just in case you're wondering at the moment, I just leave those in place. They're not fixed in place, I can move them out. But when I take my loom off the stand, usually I'm putting it back on fairly quickly, so I just leave those in place. Moving the loom around to the other side, you can see the brake systems here. So using what I just told you about determining the front and the back of the loom, you can see that this is the front, that nice rounded piece. Here is the back. It's a little bit harder to see, but it still has that cutout piece. And we've got the brakes at the front, the back and the front. Ashford makes heavy-duty plastic wheels and brakes for their looms, as well as some little metal pieces to hold the brakes in place. They did used to do wood, so if you have an older loom from the 70s or 80s, then yours may have wood pieces, and that's just something a little bit different. Some people may not like the plastic aspect, but I have to say that after nearly 10 years of use, these brakes are working just the same as they did on day one. They can be a little bit stiff, and that hasn't really loosened over time, but I probably consider that a positive rather than a negative, because as I said, this loom has been used almost constantly, and so these have been under constant tension, and if they haven't changed in nearly 10 years, then I think that's a good thing. These brake systems are very easy to use, and just as a quick example, I'm going to loosen off a little tension from the back. So I just push that towards the back, release the brake, it's that simple, and then just let that go gently. I don't usually advance very much all at once. Click that brake back into place, and I can pop over to the front, and all I have to do at this point is just to wind towards me to retension the loom. Very simple, very easy, and the brake system works really, really well. At the front and the back, the very front and the very back of the loom, these are the warp beams, and I can't show you these so well at the moment because obviously there is a warp on the loom, but you can see that my warp has been wound as I weave. It winds around that front beam and just keeps winding on itself. I've got some paper inserted here because I am using a very fine thread, and that just helps to avoid any gappiness as I roll forward. I also have paper inserted at the back. Attached to the cloth and the warp beam at the back is an apron rod, and that is what we wind our warp onto. And on the Ashford looms, we have these plastic, again, this heavy duty plastic ties on the apron rods. I have heard of some people having these break on them, but mine have never broken, and they don't even show that much wear. So I'm totally happy with that arrangement. So now we'll have a look to the middle section, and I'm going to talk about heddle blocks. Now, because I've had this loom for quite some time, when I first bought it, it came with a single heddle block, which looks like this. So this is what was attached to my loom, and it meant that I could just rest one heddle in place. These days, if you buy an Ashford rigid heddle loom, they have a double heddle block built in, which I think is a really smart move, because it's something that you can either opt to just use for one heddle, or you have the option built in, ready to go if you wanted to try out two heddles. Now I'm going to link down below to some double heddle information and some three heddle information as well, in case anyone is interested in that, because I have a lot of resources that can help you out with that. But basically, because of this double heddle block, so I did purchase the double heddle block separately quite a number of years ago, and I took the single heddle block off and attached the double heddle block. So if I lift this heddle out of place, I can reposition it. It's a little bit tough because I've got a warp on at the moment, but this is how it sits in the back. So it's exactly the same in the front and the back, but when I'm only using a single heddle, I'll have it positioned at the front. That makes sense. But if I'm using two heddles, I'll have one position here and the other one positioned at the front. When you purchase an Ashford rigid heddle loom, these are some of the things that you will get that will just come with the loom that don't have to be separately purchased. So you will receive a direct warping peg. You will get two clamps. One is for the peg and one is for the actual loom to clamp that to a table. The stick shuttle, now I can't remember whether you get one or two, so it's worth checking, but you will get the size that is appropriate to the loom size that you've ordered, and then you'll get some cardboard stick separators. Not to forget the heddle, so you will get a heddle, just one heddle to start you off with, And for an Ashford, you will get a 7.5 dent heddle, which is a really great size to start out with. You should also get a threading hook and a reed hook as part of the rigid heddle kit. However, my favorite threading hook is this double-ended. It is made by Ashford and it is made of plastic, and I've spoken about these quite a lot, but if you haven't heard me speak about them before, they've got the thicker end for threading the slots and then the thinner end for threading the holes. These are great sizes. The only time that I struggle with this a little bit is when I'm using my 15 dent heddle, and although the threading hook does get through the holes in the 15 dent, it's a little bit of a squash. But apart from that, these are fantastic. I really like the fact that they are flexible, but I've never broken one. So they're pretty heavy duty and they last well. And I've got a bunch of them because I started out with just one. And of course I was forever losing it because it's flat. I'd lose it sitting under books and under piles of other stuff that I've got lying around. So now I have at least 5 of these, so I've always got one on hand. So I really recommend that you grab not just one, but a couple of these. They are pretty cheap to buy. Something I want to mention about Ashford is the finished and unfinished products. And I'm going to talk specifically about the loom in a moment, but I'm going to talk about the tools first. So when you buy things, it's good to check whether it's finished or unfinished. I've got an example here of 2 little pickup sticks, and the one on the left is finished and the one on the right wasn't. Now, I was a little bit surprised when I ordered this pickup stick and it arrived unfinished, because previously when I'd ordered my pickup sticks or whatever other tools I was using, whether it was a stick shuttle, whatever, from Ashford, they would come finished. But this one turned up unfinished, and a few other tools have as well. So it probably says in the listing, if you're going to buy online, whether the thing is finished or not. And basically what I mean by finished is this is like a raw wood. Of course, it's been sanded and everything, so it's lovely and smooth, but it hasn't been lacquered. This one has a lacquer on it. It's got a slight shine to it and it's a bit slipperier. Now, using the 2 pickup sticks, I don't mind either of them. I find them both pretty good. This one is probably better for sliding in and out of threads when you're actually doing the pickup. And this one's probably a little bit better for staying in place once you are holding your pickup in place. But they're both good. It's just a good thing to know. Now, in that same vein, I have here a direct warping peg, and this is the one that came with my loom. This is finished, so it's all nicely sanded, lightly lacquered, and it's very nice and smooth, especially this part, the peg part of the warping peg. It is really important for it to be smooth because you have loops of thread going around here, and then when you finish the loops of thread, you're going to pick them up and slip them off, right? So you want something that is a bit slippery. This is an extra peg that I ordered some time ago, and I was a little bit surprised when it arrived. If you can see on this side, it's quite rough, like it hasn't been sanded back properly. It's just this one section right here on this side. Actually, feeling this side, it's a little bit rough on this side as well. So I need to take some fine sandpaper to this and finish it off myself. But I didn't really expect that I would have to do that. So generally speaking, what I would say is when you buy a loom kit, things all together, generally they all come finished and ready to go. Not always, but when you buy extra additional tools, it may be like this pickup stick that I got, that it comes just as raw wood, unfinished. Something I get asked a great deal by new loom buyers is, should I finish my loom or not? Because what happens is you buy the loom, it arrives flat packed in a box. So all these pieces, none of this is put together. They're all laying side by side, lovely and neat in a box, and you need to take them out and put them together yourself. And before you do that, you need to decide, am I going to put some sort of lacquer or wax or anything, paint it, whatever it is, on this loom? I can't answer that question for you. I can only tell you what I did. So when my loom arrived, I was mega excited and I got the loom put together very quickly without any kind of finish on it whatsoever. So over the almost 10 years that I've had it, the wood has changed colour slightly, and you can see the best evidence of this when you look at these parts here where it's normally bolted onto my stand, because as I said, it spends most of its time on my stand, and when it's bolted onto the stand, it has one of these sitting right here, which blocks the sunlight, same as over here. So you can see quite easily that underneath where the sunlight's been blocked, it's quite a bit lighter. Now, when I've got this clamped onto my stand, I'm not at all worried about the colour of the wood. To me, it looks just fine. It looks like used wood, as it should by now. But for the most part, I have kept it out of the sun, and of course I've made sure that it's not in a damp environment and all of those good things that will have an impact on wood over time. So the decision whether to finish the loom before you put the parts together or not is completely up to you. I've seen some people online who have an artistic background and they paint flowers and beautiful things on the loom. I've seen other people do a simple lacquer. I've seen some people do a stain because they like the look of darker wood. And I've seen some people do the wax. Ashford actually sell the wax for the looms as well. So it's completely up to you. But hopefully what I've showed you today will help you to make a decision about that. And, just be aware of what's important to you as far as the looks go. Now let's talk about heddles. There is a great size range in heddles for the Ashford looms, all the way from 2.5 dent up to 15 dent. I'm laying my 7.5 dent and my 15 dent side by side just so that you can see the size comparison here. The 7.5 is the largest one that I have, and the 15 is the smallest one that I have. The reason that I don't have, say, a 5 or a 2.5 dent heddle is just because I don't prefer to weave with yarns that thick, and I wouldn't really use them, I don't think. They also have vari-dent heddles available, which means that in some sections you would have 1 dent and in the next section you would have a different size dent. So it allows you to thread different size yarns on the same piece, but again, I don't have those because I don't really think that I would use them very much. I think they'd be fun to explore if you were into thick and thin threading and using different types of yarns in the same piece. Now, the actual heddle part is made of, again, a heavy duty plastic encased in these wooden frames. The 7.5 dent heddle, though, this isn't the first one that came with my loom, but my original 7.5 dent heddle is doing absolutely fine, no problems at all. I haven't had any trouble with any of the plastic or any of the wood. Now, when you're using something like the 15 dent heddle, you have to thread it with a little bit more care than if you were using something a bit larger like this one. Because if you look at each piece that is set into the wood, they are so much thinner on the 15 dent. So I've noticed that while I'm threading, even here just while I'm mucking around showing you this, I can actually move those from side to side. Whereas with the 7.5, they're quite rigid. So you just need to be aware of that and be more careful when you're threading, and just be gentle with that threading hook so that you're not pulling these out of place and potentially breaking them. A couple more things I want to point out about the heddles. Make sure that you don't have them in a really hot place. So in front of a window with direct sunlight for any portion of the day is probably not a good idea, especially in summer. And accidentally leaving them somewhere that they're going to be exposed to heat. This is plastic and it will melt. So you need to take care and watch out for that. Have them in a dedicated space and know that the temperature is fairly even. Now, just as damaging as heat can be moisture. So we need, and this is more for the wood aspect, and this goes for the loom as well. If you have your loom in a place where it's going to get wet or where it's very humid or it's constantly going to be exposed to moisture, you can't expect your loom to live a long time. The frame may warp or buckle, and the same goes for any of the wood that you have. But again, if you keep them in a well-temperatured room, a dry space, away from direct sunlight, your loom will definitely last as long as mine and beyond, because I know plenty of Ashford rigid heddle weavers who have looms from the 70s and they're still going strong. So just like any well-made piece of equipment, if you look after it and you're aware of how to look after it, it will serve you very well. And then the last thing I want to mention about the heddles is that each heddle is printed with the Ashford name, and it has the number of dents per inch. This means that there are 7.5 dents per inch, and then right next to that it has 30/10, which means 30 dents per 10 centimeters. Also, right in the middle here is a dot, and you'll find this on every Ashford heddle as well, and it's super handy because it marks out the middle of the heddle for you. So that's super handy for when you're counting up your spaces. People do ask me about my stand all the time, and I'm really sorry to tell you that this type of stand is no longer available. Instead, they're making a foldable stand that is a bit different to this one. So people always see me using this stand in my videos and they're like, oh, where did you get that stand? They thought maybe my husband had custom built it for me, but no, this was the old Ashford stand. And I really love it actually, because even though it's not foldable or portable, it's strong and sturdy, and it has these shelves. This is the really ultimate clincher for me, is these shelves. So you can put all your little bits and pieces, you know, shuttles that you're not using, little pair of scissors, all those kind of things that you need while you're at the loom, you can pop them on the shelves. But yes, if you've wondered about my stand, unfortunately you can't get them anymore. And if you're thinking about stands in general, wondering if you need one for your loom or not, I have already made a video on that, and I do recommend stands if you can afford one, and I'll link to that video down below. Another thing is, if you are handy with wood yourself, or you have a partner who is handy with wood, as many of us do, it is completely feasible to make something like this stand with the shelves. And I've seen a lot of people do that. So that may be an option for at least some of you. So I've told you a little bit about the loom itself. You can probably tell that I really like this loom. I like the company. I think their products are really well made. But you might be wondering if there are actually any negatives. There's one negative that I'm going to mention, but I'm going to say it's probably not a really fair negative when I'm talking just particularly about this loom. The negative is that the tension can leave a little bit to be desired, particularly when I'm weaving with, say, it's the finer threads that I am here, where I'm using an 8-tooth tencel. But this is not an Ashford issue, this is a rigid heddle issue, because the rigid heddle loom is just not designed in the same way that, say, a floor loom is, in order to hold really high tension. So to give my overall really honest opinion of this loom after nearly 10 years of owning it, I love it. I recommend it fully without reserve, and I have recommended it to thousands of my students, and I have absolutely no qualms about doing so. If you yourself are interested in purchasing your first rigid heddle loom, or maybe it's your first Ashford rigid heddle loom, as I said, I'm going to have a lot of resources down below. Some of those resources are going to include affiliate links. These are links for places that you can click on to view these looms, and if you purchase, then I get a small commission. And that's just one of the ways that I help to support myself here on YouTube. And it's like a little thank you from you to me for making the content, giving you the information and sharing all of these things with you at no extra cost to yourself. In Australia, I am an affiliate for Thread Collective, and in the US, I'm an affiliate for Amazon and The Woolery. And you'll find those links down below. Also, I want to remind you that all of the things that I've said today, they're just my opinion about using this loom. I haven't actually used any other brand of rigid heddle loom to be able to compare it to, and I know that a lot of you already have your own brand of rigid heddle loom and you absolutely love them. And that's the main aim in weaving, is to find a loom that you love and you're really comfortable with. If you haven't purchased your first loom yet, then hopefully this is a good place to start for you. If you have any more questions about this loom that I haven't covered in today's video, I'm more than happy for you to ask me questions in the comments section. I hope you can take a moment to like and subscribe, and until next time, happy weaving!